watch the video, but then we'll stop and take it back. Make sure we understand that every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to state that he fully understands what we said. But that's because he has to know it all, and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Tell me, it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see, so come learn along. Whoa. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see. I thought you have to watch and see, so come learn along. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you have to watch and see, so come learn along. Now you may tell me, hey, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to state that he fully understands what we're saying. And you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to state that he fully understands what was said. But that's because he has to know it all, and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. But you'll have to watch and see, so come learn along. Long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to state that he fully understands what was said. But that's because he has to know it all. He doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. But you'll have to watch and see, so come learn along.
That's right. Come learn along. That's what we're doing. And I am Kudos, and I am a slow learner. That's why we take things real slow. One of the reasons I'm doing this stream like I'm doing it is I always get frustrated when there's like a big long debate, and then you hear people talk about it afterwards, and they all just say bullshit. They all just say totally different things about who did what and who said what and who crushed who dominated who, right? And it's all just based on fallible memory. And I see this in myself. I can't remember everything someone said when they talk for 10 minutes. Are you kidding me? There's no way, right? You just get a general vibe. You might remember a little thing or two there, here or there. But you definitely might also misremember some things. You might hear little words, certain words, and then spin them around and out of context. Because if you just listen to someone say something one time, you're going to be like, well, I think this is what they said. I think this is what they meant, right? And then so multiply that by 100 when you have a debate, when you have people talking over you, talking over each other, going back and forth, right? You got these long, in some cases, information dense explanations, and it's I don't know about you, but I don't know how to follow this shit and feel confident that I have a true understanding of it. So we're taking this shit so slow. Um and we could go slower, to be honest. I feel like I'm actually rushing through it considering what I want to do. But yeah, we've done what, 12 hours of streaming. We are nearing the end of our analysis of hour 1. And I think I've got a little energy. I'm feeling a little sick, but I took a good long nap, had some medicine, and had some food and stuff, and I think I got maybe a good couple hours in me. And I got this new idea as a new way of visualizing our debate. This is something I've kind of wanted to see, and the only way to really make it, I'm sure computers or something could make this, or some AI could make this, but I just wanted to make it myself. So I drew up. This is an hour. I made each horizontal line is 1 minute. Okay. The first 3 minutes and 42 seconds are just playing little clips from later in the debate, which I have never watched. I don't care to watch those. I don't like them. I don't want them. I don't want. Maybe at the very end we'll go back and watch which clips they decided to pull out. By then we'll be very familiar with the whole debate, and it'll be interesting to see what were the pullout clips that they wanted. And then I have it color coded, right? Okay, so this is a little incorrect. I need to erase some of this. Yeah, but anyway, not all that. So anyway, I color code it based on who's talking. So what we'll see is red. Let's actually do this. Red is Norman Finkelstein. The gray is Lexifer Lutherfried. Blue Benny. Purple Moeen Rabbani. And green little skunk twerp piece of shit Destiny is green. So there we can see, get an idea of who talked the most, who interrupted the most, who went on the longest, these, and then we can see the gray interruptions from Lex. Later on in the document, so this is, hold on, let's look at the whole thing. I'm getting towards the end here, and this is actually, I was going to finish doing this live on stream, because I started doing this when I wasn't streaming. I figured maybe I should have done all of this while I was streaming, but we can finish it. And then this is how we'll kind of carry on, I think, with hour 2. Because this is the kind of thing I can make kind of casually while listening to it, right? Because because of the pace of it, I can work 1 minute at a time, and it doesn't take a minute just to draw a little color line. By the way, what I have here is different layers. This is the black and white lines. This is my color layer. Instead of having it as a normal, so if it's normal, it's fine, but like it covers up all the grid, right? and it just looks really sloppy. So instead of having this as a normal layer, I'm having it just darken the layers under it, which means the white background just turns the color, but anything that's black isn't affected because it'll only affect lighter colors. So that's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. I can color within the lines very easily because you get a little bumper. It doesn't matter if you're over the line or whatever. You see that? So, and I just use my line tool, adjust the size right. Let's talk about Krita for a second. Krita is this program I'm using. I highly recommend it. It's totally free and it's great. It does everything. Does it all. It sometimes gets intimidating when people first get it because it does it all. That you don't even know where to start. A few things, and I don't even know if actually did I make these. Some of these are the normal keyboard shortcuts, right? So I'm using my scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out. When I want to brush, I just hit the B key, and I can draw shapes or whatever. If I want to change the shape of my brush, I just right-click, and I get this big wheel thing, and I can put all my favorite brushes on it, and I have all my favorite ones I like to use to do different effects and whatever. Boom, boom, boom. And I can also change the color. And there's different ways you can change color, like the way you like to choose your color palettes as you draw. I like this thing because it's basically just every RGB at every brightness or whatever. It's just the whole RGB spectrum. And then, but they also have a thing called, and I'm gonna blow this up a little bit so we can see it. If you look over here, this is a cool one called the Artistic Color Selector. So everything, all of the little things around the side that's not your canvas, you can find in settings. And oh, you can't see that. Hold on, I gotta make sure we're capturing the window correctly. Okay, what we'll do, instead of capture window, we're gonna do a display capture so that you can see what I see. Do you see what I see? All right. So at the top, you got, let's make that bigger. At the top, you got settings, Dockers. And all this shit is your Dockers. So I like to have artistic color selector. There's other one that's called specific color selector. If you know the RGB number color name, or you just want to dial in your RGB, you can do that. That's the specific color selector. But then I like this one. Because artistic color selector, you have your brightness to darkness on like a slotted notches, so you can get the exact same brightness, right? Keep that totally consistent, or vary it by exact amounts, and then you can also change your hue and saturation over here with the same idea. So if you want to lock in certain brightnesses or lock in certain saturations or lock in hues, you can find, and so you can also change how I don't know, I'm having a hard time saying this, but you get what I mean. So each little notch that you can change it, you can divide it into 30, so each notch is a very different, very subtle change, right? And you can do the same with your hues and everything. So yeah, basically if depending on how exact you want to be with your coloring, you could get really, really detailed, and you can lock in okay, I just want the same hue right? I like this blue and I just want to darken it. Boom, 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 boom. And then like lighten it. Because maybe you want to keep all your colors consistent, but you want to do like shading and highlights, and you want to keep them the same color, so it doesn't affect like that or something. And also, you know, with Krita you could do all your shading and highlights on separate layers, so that way you can change them and you know, control them and adjust them independently. Like with a lot of stuff, like when I'm drawing something, like I can draw like basically whatever in whatever color, and then later on I can like, here, let's do an example. I do a blue blob and I'm like, okay, well I didn't want it to be a blue blob, but I like the shape exactly, so I can't redraw that unique shape. So I can go in here, I can change any of the hue by making a filter mask. HSV, HSL adjustment. To me, this is the most like intuitive way of imagining color, is through my let's move that over here. It's this thing. It's through my thinking in terms of hue, saturation, and lightness. Right? Every different color is just a hue, right? And it goes from red to ultraviolet to infrared. That's all we can see, right? And it just goes in a cycle like that. So if you, what color was this originally? Okay, yeah. If you got a blue thing and you want it to be yellow, you can make it yellow by just keep going until it's yellow. Let's make it yellow. Oh, we got to turn the saturation up. There we go. So yeah, we can turn any color into any other color, but then, you know, you can also make it super bright and saturated, or super dark, or super pale, whatever you want to do. So to me, that's the most, you know, intuitive thing. And then you could also click over here, and if you look up here, you have this opacity 100%, and your mouse, your cursor will do this weird thing. And that means you can drag it side to side, and you could fade it out a little bit if you want. And you can see other shit under it. Or you can change how it interacts with the layers under it. Depending on what colors you got underneath it, you can make this just overlay or whatever. It's very cool. So this program has a lot of coolness to it, and the possibilities are endless. And so, you know, if you have an idea, or you're like, oh, I want to draw like a big hour and figure out like who was talking during it, this is how we do it. So, if you would like to make your own hour, all you got to do is make little segments of 6 and then make 10 of them. Or make little segments of 10 and make 6 of them, which I kind of should have done, but whatever. I thought of it more as a 6 times 10 kind of thing. And so, what can we conclude by this? I think when we get to hour 2, we might have to reconceptualize like actually what this debate is about. Or not what the debate is about. Who, between which actually two people are debating. Cuz this looks like, how much green do you see? How much green do you see? Would you be like, oh yeah, this is a debate between red and green? You know, like, hold on. Just for fun, let's make this look more like 2 teams, right? So I'm gonna combine. We're gonna combine Norm. Let's combine Norm and Rabbani's colors to kind of show them as one team, right? I'm just going to make a new layer on top, so I'm not destroying anything. I'm just covering it up. And let's make this kind of peachy hot orange. Hot red. All right, so this is. Oh, and I haven't finished the last 5 minutes. We're gonna do that. We'll do that in a second. But right now, we're just sort of we, meaning I, am just sort of curious if we split them into teams. What does that look like? So we're gonna select the green and the blue. Go back to this layer. And let's call this these guys. Come on, meow. All right. Okay, so this is each person. And this is teams. Okay, so does this look like a debate between, red and green? Red does a big chunk, green does a smaller chunk. Red does a big chunk, green does an even smaller chunk. Red does about the same or a little bit the same chunk. I mean, I don't know. It seems like Red's at least dominating the conversation, dominating the thing. Now, another thing we can include, because this is just time talked, right? In our other in this one, we mark down the words. This chart here doesn't have anything to do with timing, right? This is a timeless document. It is a living document, and it is timeless. It's not relevant for how long someone talked. It's relevant what the fuck they said and how many words they used. And that's not the same thing either. Because they might say a lot of words and not convey a lot of information, or they might vice versa. So we have to also keep that in mind. For instance, Destiny, he only said 540 words. He also didn't really deliver a lot of ideas. He did, he sent some accusations vaguely towards quote unquote some people, which many of them were straw man attacks, or basically like, all these people that I debate on this topic say this, but what about that? And like, no, these people didn't say this. Like, he goes, most people on the debate side, on the other side, don't want to admit that the Arabs rejected the partition resolution outright, out of principle. And it's like, no, dude, the two guys who talked before you totally said that, you dick. Who are you arguing against? Are you just trying to reinforce one of their talking points? I don't know. So anyway, these charts kind of tell us different things. This might also inform us as to some of the reasons that certain people perceive the debate to have gone one way or the other, right? I also don't. That's going to be another issue we might have to try to look into. Maybe we'll read the comments of the video or something. Maybe you look for Reddit threads about it. But let's try to figure out how people reacted to this. And I think the most interesting opinions I'm interested in hearing from are people who are not familiar with anybody and don't know anything about the issue even. Because I've come into this with a huge preconception of hating Destiny a lot. And that's definitely going to be that definitely covers my or it's going to color, it's going to affect my commentary on this and my judgments on this, of course. So that's what comments are for. You know, if you disagree, if I didn't give Pestiny his fair shake, anyone is free to write in the comments if you think like, well, tell me your interpretation of it. Okay, so here's what we gotta do. We still haven't filled out minute 55 because what happened is there was a lot of over talking and interrupting, and I want to sort of, I don't know, like just kind of check again and go slowly through to figure out who was interrupting who and how much people interrupted and talked and stuff, right? So I'm back on each person layer. And when I want to select a color that I've already used, I just hold down control, and I point my little deeper dopper at whatever color I used. So here we're just working with 5 colors. So I don't have to go in the color wheel and pick exactly the same right color. That's the thing with this wheel, is it's really hard to replicate a color. Except it does save them over here. But even then, sometimes I get confused, like which one is the which if I have like very similar greens everywhere. So a lot of times I might just screw it up. So it's just so much easier to just up, and then you have a new color. Up. I can do it fast now. So anyway, so we're working with blue, or I don't actually know somebody's going to interrupt right at the 55-minute mark, right at 55:00. I think that's I think what's going to happen. So let's pull up the video. So yeah, I've got the video right above me here. We're gonna pull that up. We're gonna go to 55. And we're gonna find out what the fuck is going on. Here we go. We're gonna go a little bit before it.
Here I read, it's deeply entrenched. Two very resonant words. Inevitable.
Inevitable is right at the 55 mark, so it's still norm.
And inbuilt.
Deeply in.
Okay, he comes in at 3 seconds, and he goes deeply. So that's about 3, and he comes in because this would be 5. Yeah, that's 5 here. So he's like 3, and then he goes
Entrenched, I never wrote.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's something you just invented.
Okay.
But
inevitable and inbuilt.
The idea
Okay.
of let me concede.
Fine.
Let me concede
Fine.
something.
No.
The idea of transfer was there. Israel Zangwill, a British Zionist, talked about it early on in the century. Even Herzl, in some way, talked about transferring population.
According to your 25 pages, everybody talked
Well,
about
that's like we keep bringing up this line from the 25 pages and the 4 pages.
Oh my god! The thing I hate is the whole like double click the screen to make it full screen. Because what? I don't want to do that. I can just press F if I want to full screen it. But sometimes I get a little carried away. I get a little clicky. Okay? I'm not perfect. Sometimes I double click when I just mean to single click. That's kind of a millennial thing. It's an elder millennial thing. Those early computers, you had to double click everything, man. You double clicked everything. It just gets ingrained into you. All right? And sometimes I'm like, oh wait, pause that. Pause that. Pause that. And then I pause it, and then it's like full screen, but not paused at all.
Given the territorial.
No. And if I want to full screen something, I'm going to pause it, and then full screen it, and then probably roll it back 10 seconds. You dig? All right, I've completely lost my place. I'm at 26 minutes. What the fuck? What the fuck? I'm trying to figure out what happened at 55 minutes. I'm trying to figure out what happened at 55 minutes. 55 minutes, 55 minutes, 55 burgers, 55 minutes. Okay, here we go.
Deeply entrenched, I never wrote.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's something you just invented.
Okay.
But
Inevitable and inbuilt.
The idea.
Okay.
Let me.
Entrenched. Two very resonant words. Inevitable and inbuilt.
Deeply entrenched, I never wrote.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's something you just invented.
Okay.
But
inevitable and inbuilt.
The idea.
Okay.
Let me concede.
Fine.
Let me concede
Fine.
something.
No.
The idea of transfer was there. Israel Zangwill, a British Zionist, talked about it early on in the century. Even Herzl, in some way, talked about transferring population. The century. Even Herzl, in some way, talked about transfer. Population.
According to your 25 pages, everybody talked
Hold on a
about it.
second. We keep bringing up this line from the 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have Benny in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism, in whatever Zionism is today? And how much power, influence does Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and influence the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today?
The Zionist movement up to 1948.
Okay, I think it's just Benny for the rest of this, and then Milani starts at 58, 50 something. I think. Let's double check.
Zionist ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise up to 1948. And I think Zionist ideology was also important in the first decades of Israel's existence. Slowly, the hold of Zionism, if you like Bolshevism held the Soviet Union, gradually faded, and a lot of Israelis today think in terms of individual success and then the capitalism and all sorts of things which are nothing to do with Zionism. But Zionism was very important. But what I'm saying is that the idea of transfer wasn't the core of Zionism. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jews who had been vastly persecuted in Eastern Europe and, incidentally, in the Arab world, the Muslim world, for centuries, and eventually ending up with the Holocaust. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jewish people by establishing a state or reestablishing a Jewish state on the ancient Jewish homeland, which is something the Arabs today even deny, that there were Jews in Palestine or the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. Arafat famously said, what temple was there on Temple Mount? Maybe it was in Nablus, which of course is nonsense. But they had a strong connection for thousands of years to the land to which they wanted to return, and returned there. They found that on the land lived hundreds of thousands of Arabs, and the question was how to accommodate the vision of a Jewish state in Palestine alongside the existence of these Arab masses living on, who were indigenous, in fact, to the land by that stage. And the idea of partition, because they couldn't live together, because Arabs didn't want to live together with the Jews, and I think the Jews also didn't want to live together in one state with Arabs in general. The idea of partition was the thing which the Zionists accepted. Okay, we can only get a small part of Palestine. The Arabs will get in 37 most of Palestine. In 1947, the ratios were changed, but we can we can live side by side with each other in a partitioned Palestine. And this was the essence of it. The idea of transfer it was there, but it was never adopted as policy. But in 1947-48, the Arabs attacked, trying to destroy essentially the Zionist enterprise and the emergent Jewish state. And the reaction was transfer in some way.
I talked about this, I think, very late into the last stream. But that line that he says is so fucking bizarre. When he says, live side by side with each other in a partitioned Palestine. Partitioned. Side by side. This is being map-brained. Map-brained. I love maps, but you have to always remember that maps aren't real. Just because two big chunks that you colored in on a map appear to be side by side, that's not what they are in the real world. Go out in the real world to a place that you think is side by side with another place, and then go from one place to that other place. Tell me how side by side it is. Hey, Peru's right next to Brazil. Okay, cool. Yeah, sure. So go to Lima and then just go to Brazil. I'll wait. I'll drop you off in Lima, and you gotta and you gotta meet me somewhere in Brazil. You gotta meet me in Brasilia. You gotta meet me in Sao Paulo. You're not. Now also, go to Tijuana. Living side by side. Even the reality, because the partition plan or some weird form of it was quote unquote accepted. They didn't care that Arabs didn't accept it. They didn't not do it. They did it. They did the whole thing. And their idea was to partition everyone off of the land. Get off the land. Go on the other side of a wall. And by the way, your land is separated, and you have to go through our land to get there. So that means you got to go through our checkpoints. Living side by side. You live side by side with people who live in the same town as you and have all the same rights as you. That's what that means. How can you work side by side with someone who isn't even allowed into the place? I think that's such a. It sucks. I don't know if he actually thinks that. What does he imagine living side by side with someone means? Because that to me is just gross. This is part of his answer to Lexifer's amazing question. He says, hold on a second. We keep bringing up this line, the 25 pages and the 4 pages. Lex, you are not following along. You are not following along anything. Norm explained exactly why there was 4 pages and then 25 pages. Okay? When you wrote your first book on the Palestinian refugee question, You only had a few lines on the issue of transfer, 4 pages. In the first book, 4 pages, maybe 4. You know, I'm not going to quarrel. My memory is not clear. We're talking about 40 years ago. I read it, but I read other things by you. And you were taken to task. I didn't yada yada anything. I'm going to go back and start again. We're talking about 40 years ago. I read it. You were taken to task, if my memory is correct, that you hadn't adequately documented the claims of transfer. Allow me to finish. Professor Morris, allow me to finish. Anyway, he goes, in the revised version of your first book, you devoted 25 pages to copiously documenting the salience of transfer in Zionist thinking. In fact, you used a very provocative and resonant phrase. You said that transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. Okay? So the first edition had 4 pages. The later edition had 25 pages. Okay? So when we go here, where was that? Where before us? Okay, I'm not quoting part. I'm quoting 25 pages, where Professor Morris was at great pains to document the claim that appeared in those early 4 pages of his book. Make sense? He's quoting the 25 pages that contain Professor Morris taking great pains to document the claims that were in the early 4 pages. When he says early, he means earlier in time, the earlier edition of the book. He had the first edition with 4 pages. He expanded it out to 25 pages in the later editions. Okay, next time, because as I said, Benny, Mr. Morris, I have a problem reconciling what you're saying. It was either incidental or it was deeply entrenched. Here, I read it's deeply entrenched. 2 very resonant words, inevitable and inbuilt. Deeply entrenched, I never wrote it. And then he's like, let me concede something. The idea of transfer was there. Israel Zangwill, a British Zionist, talked about it early in the century. Even Herzl in some way talked about transfer in population. According to your 25 pages, everybody talked about it. Okay, and then here comes Galaxy Brain Lex. Hold on a second. We keep bringing up this line, the 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have Benny right in front of us. Right now. We're lucky to have Benny in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism and whatever Zionism is today, and how much power, influence the Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and the influence, the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today? Quite a thing. Woo! Quite a question. And then Benny basically tries to say, yeah, it was really important early on, but then not so much later. And then it goes back to this thing that the idea of the partition was the thing which Zionists accepted. Okay, we can only get a small part of Palestine. The Arabs will get in 1937, most of Palestine in 1947. The ratios were changed, but we can live side by side with each other. Oh, boy. Oh, All right, we're gonna take a little break, and this one goes out to our dummy dope of the day. The dumb dope of the day is gonna be Lexifer Friedman.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. We keep bringing up this line. The 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have Betty in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism, and whatever Zionism is today? And how much power, influence the Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and the influence, the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today. Hold on a second, we keep bringing up this line. The 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have Betty in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism, and whatever Zionism is today? And how much power, influence the Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and the influence, the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today. Have on Israel today. Hold on a second, we keep bringing up this line. The 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have Betty in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism, and whatever Zionism is today? And how much power, influence the Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and the influence, the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today. 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 Hold on a second, we keep bringing up this line.
There's a long way, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for us to watch it all. So now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for girls to watch it all. So slow. We watch the video, but then we'll stop and take it back. Make sure we understand that every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour off debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to stay. That he fully understands what we said, but that's because he has to know it all, and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, there may be. If you hang out, you'll see, so come learn along. Whoa. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, there may be. If you hang out, you'll see. I thought you have to watch and see, so come learn along. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you have to watch and see, so come learn along. Now you may tell me, hey, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for girls to watch it all. So slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to stay. Betty fully understands what we're saying. Yeah, this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. So slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to state that he fully understands what was said, but that's because he has to know it all, and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be, but you'll have to watch and see, so come learn along. Long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Takes kudos 12 hours to stay. That he fully understands what was said, but that's because he has to know it all. He doesn't know much yet, so learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be, but you'll have to watch and see, so come learn along. Now this is a long thing, you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. Oh. You may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Cover takes kudos 12 to do, but that's because he has to know it all, and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now this a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all. So slow. Yeah. Ooh. cover takes kudos 12 to 2. But that's because he has to know it all and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Cover takes kudos 12 to do, but that's because he has to know it all, and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Cover takes kudos 12 to do, but that's because he has to know it all, and he doesn't know much yet. So learn along, let's learn along. Come learn along with kudos. Now this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. So slow, so slow. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. Yeah. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait, because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow.
All right, enough of that crap. You know, since I was a kid, one of my favorite and one of my go-to meals, like many people, instant ramen noodles. Fucking ramen, dude. And I still think they're fine. I still think they're great. I kind of go through phases where I like them more than not. But lately, there's I've seen a new player on the field of instant ramen. And I'm talking about Bulldog. Is that right, Waze? These bulldog noodles. This shit, they don't mess around. It's amazing. They go hard. I don't know if it's just the kind that they ship to Mexico, but every flavor is spicy. You can't get a non-spicy flavor. And they go hard. They go fucking hard. They're so good. Anyway, I think they're Korean. So get the Korean instant noodles, the bulldog. Those are amazing. All right. So this is our final review of hour 1. And what we're going to do, since the first time through we were fresh, we didn't know what to expect. This time through, we know exactly what happened. We know what to expect. And we have our own decisions we've already made, right? But we're going to watch it again. We're going to hope, I don't know, maybe pause a lot less. Or I might be, maybe I don't know, maybe I'll be rethinking some of the earlier takes I had by, hearing it fresh again. Because what we did is we watched this, then we went through very, very slowly and carefully and picked apart every little thing. Now we've zoomed out and taken a look at the whole hour as it is. And then we're going to rewatch it. So that's what's going to happen now. So here we go. Here's Lex's opening question.
For Israelis, 1948 is the establishment of the State of Israel and the War of Independence. For Palestinians, 1948 is the Nakba, which means catastrophe, or the displacement of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes as a consequence of the war. What to you is important to understand about the events of 1948 and the period around there, 47, 49, that helps us understand what's going on today, and maybe helps us understand the roots of all of this that started even before 1948. I was hoping that Norm could speak first, and Benny, then Ween, and then Norm.
After World War II, the British decided that they didn't want to deal with the Palestine question anymore, and the ball was thrown into the court of the United Nations. Now, as I read the record, the UN was not attempting to arbitrate or adjudicate rights and wrongs. It was confronting a very practical problem. There were two national communities in Palestine, and there were irreconcilable differences on fundamental questions, most importantly, looking at the historic record on the question of immigration, and associated with the question of immigration, the question of land. The UN Special Committee on Palestine, which came into being before the UN 181 partition resolution, the UN Special Committee, it recommended 2 states in Palestine. There was a minority position represented by Iran, India, Yugoslavia. They supported 1 state, but they believed that if forced to, the 2 communities would figure out some sort of modus vivendi and live together. The United Nations General Assembly supported partition between what it called a Jewish state and an Arab state. Now, in my reading of the record, and I understand there's new scholarship on the subject, which I've not read, but so far as I've read the record, there's no clarity on what the United Nations General Assembly meant by a Jewish state and an Arab state, except for the fact that the Jewish state would be demographically, the majority would be Jewish, and the Arab state demographically would be Arab. The UNSCOP, the UN Special Committee on Palestine, it was very clear, and it was reiterated many times, that in recommending 2 states, each state, the Arab state and the Jewish state, would have to guarantee full equality of all citizens with regard to political, civil, and religious matters. Now, that does raise the question, if there is absolute full equality of all citizens, both in the Jewish state and the Arab state, with regard to political rights, civil rights, and religious rights, apart from the demographic majority, it's very unclear what it meant to call a state Jewish or call a state Arab. In my view, the partition resolution was the correct decision. I do not believe that the Arab and Jewish communities could, at that point, be made to live together. I disagree with the minority position of India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, and that not being a practical option, two states was the only other option. In this regard, I would want to pay tribute to what was probably the most moving speech at the UN General Assembly proceedings by the Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko. I was very tempted to quote it at length, but I recognized that would be taking too much time. So I asked a young friend, Jamie Stern Weiner, to edit it and just get the essence of what Foreign Minister Gromyko had to say. During the last war, Gromyko said, the Jewish people underwent exceptional sorrow and suffering. Without any exaggeration, this sorrow and suffering are indescribable. Hundreds of thousands of Jews are wandering about in various countries of Europe in search of means of existence and in search of shelter. The United Nations cannot and must not regard this situation with indifference. Past experience, particularly during the Second World War, shows that no Western European state was able to provide adequate assistance for the Jewish people in defending its rights and its very existence from the violence of the Hitlerites and their allies. This is an unpleasant fact, but unfortunately, like all other facts, it must be admitted. Gromyko went on to say, in principle, he supports one state, or the Soviet Union supports one state. But, he said, if relations between the Jewish and Arab populations of Palestine proved to be so bad that it would be impossible to reconcile them and to ensure the peaceful coexistence of the Arabs and the Jews, the Soviet Union would support two states. I personally am not convinced that the two states would have been unsustainable in the long term if, and this is a big if, the Zionist movement had been faithful to the position it proclaimed during the UNSCOP public hearings. At the time, Ben-Gurion testified, quote, I want to express what we mean by a Jewish state. We mean by a Jewish state simply a state where the majority of the people are Jews, not a state where a Jew has in any way any privilege more than anyone else. A Jewish state means a state based on absolute equality of all her citizens and on democracy. Alas, this was not to be. As Professor Morris has written, quote, Zionist ideology and practice were necessarily and elementally expansionist. And then he wrote in another book, transfer, the euphemism for expulsion, transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism because it sought to transform a land which was Arab into a Jewish state. And a Jewish state could not have arisen without a major displacement of Arab population. And because this aim automatically produced resistance among the Arabs, which in turn persuaded the Yeshuv's leaders, the Yeshuv being the Jewish community, the Yeshuv's leaders that a hostile Arab majority or large minority could not remain in place if a Jewish state was to arise or safely endure. Or, as Professor Morris retrospectively put it, quote, a removing of a population was needed. Without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established, unquote. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution, while Israeli leaders, acting under compulsions inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism, found a pretext in the course of the First Arab-Israeli War to expel the indigenous population and expand its borders. I therefore conclude that neither side was committed to the letter of the partition resolution, and both sides aborted it.
Thank you, Norm. Norm asked that we make a lengthy statement in the beginning. Benny, I hope it's okay to call everybody by their first name in the name of camaraderie. Norm has quoted several things you said. Perhaps you can comment broadly on the question of 1948 and maybe respond to the things that Norm said.
Yeah. UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, recommended partition. The majority of UNSCOP recommended partition, which was accepted by the UN General Assembly in November 1947. Essentially, looking back to the Peel Commission in 1937, 10 years earlier, a British commission had looked at the problem of Palestine, the two warring national groups who.
You know, we never looked at the Peel Commission of 1937. Let's take a look at that. Is it relevant to us? Formerly known as the Palestine Royal Commission, British Royal Commission of Inquiry, headed by Lord Peel. So here we have another Palestine map. So the dotted lines are international boundaries, railways, roads. Map of the Royal Commission's partition plan. So 1937, we have Lebanon, we have Syria, we have Jordan. Okay, so here's the Jordan River. That's the river in the river to the sea. There's the Mediterranean, that's the sea. This is Sinai. Okay, so it's not Egypt. This is, what does it say? Transjordan. I see. Syria, Lebanon. Okay. And then railways, roads. What is this red line here? What is the red line? So I'm just seeing railways, roads. Is the red meant to be the partition? Map of the Royal Commission's partition plan reproduced from their reports. Map number 3. Okay, I guess I would assume that within the red line is proposed Jewish territory, but then what is this black and white crosshatch? Including Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Jericho. Okay. Was appointed in 36 to investigate a cause of conflict in Palestine, which was administered by the United Kingdom. Commission published a report. Said the League of Nations mandate had become unworkable and recommended partition. British cabinet endorsed partition plan, but requested more information. Following the publication in 1938, the Woodhead Commission was appointed to examine in detail and recommend an actual partition plan. Zionist leadership was bitterly divided over the plan. In a resolution adopted, let's go back a little bit. Arab leadership opposed the partition plan. Arab Higher Committee opposed the idea of a Jewish state and called for an independent state of Palestine, with protection of all legitimate Jewish and other minority rights and safeguarding of reasonable British interests. They also demanded cessation of all Jewish immigration and land purchase. They argued that the creation of a Jewish state and lack of independent Palestine was a betrayal of the word given by Britain. The Arab Higher Committee. I remember it, Benny talking about how, like, oh, they don't have a state. They never try to have a state. These guys apparently did. Central political organ of the Palestine Arabs and in mandatory Palestine. I keep hearing that mandatory. Is that a meaningful thing? What does that mean? Mandatory Palestine was a British geopolitical entity that existed between 1920 and 1948 in the region of Palestine. After 1922, in the terms of the League of Nations. After an Arab uprising against the Ottoman Empire during the First World War in 1916, British forces drove Ottoman forces out of Levant. What is Levant? Countries and regions of the Levant in its broad historical meaning, equivalent to Eastern Mediterranean. Countries of the Levant in 20th century, sometimes included. So these are the Levant countries. So it may or may not include fucking Libya and Egypt and Turkey and Greece. But it definitely includes Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. And Cyprus. Is that Cyprus? Okay. So there's an Arab uprising. UK had agreed in the McMahon-Mauthausen correspondence that it would honor Arab independence in case of revolt, but in the end, the United Kingdom and France divided what had been Ottoman Syria under the an act of betrayal in the eyes of the Arabs. Another issue was the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which British promised its support for establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. Fuck you, Britain. Man. Mandatory Palestine was then established in 1920, and the British obtained a mandate for Palestine from the League of Nations. Mandatory Palestine was established, and the British obtained... So I don't understand. Was it then controlled by the British? During the mandate, obtained a mandate for Palestine from the League of Nations in 22. The area saw successive waves of Jewish immigration and the rise of national movements in both Jewish and Arab communities. Competing interests of the two populations led to 36 to 39 Arab revolt in Palestine. The rise of nationalist movements in both Jewish and Arab communities. See, this makes sense. Because, when you have enough people, you're going to have people who are extreme and not, right? I guess most people don't, join nationalist movements. But there's always somebody who's willing to join a nationalist movement. And if you have enough people, then you have enough nationalist movement type people. And they can build up steam. Competing interests of the two populations led to the 36 to 39 Arab revolt in Palestine and the 44 to 48 Jewish insurgency. Paramilitary campaign carried out by Zionist militia and underground groups, including Haganah against British rule in mandatory Palestine. The UN partition plan for Palestine to divide the territory into two states, one Arab, one Jewish, was passed. It seems to me, and this is a point I probably would disagree with Norm Finkelstein on, is that this partition agreement was a good idea because it was the only way that these people would be able to live in harmony. But I think the constant interference by the British of controlling and occupying everything and just like mandating all this stuff, just being involved like so materially in every way, pushing and affecting all this shit, is what was causing the problems in the first place. Like, what if instead of calling it mandatory Palestine, they just fucked off? I don't know. They would have had some wars and shit. Sure. But I don't know. I think it would have kind of evened out. It would reach a point where people were willing to compromise a little bit and cool down. Especially if nobody helps them by like sending military and sending aid and sending weapons to go help them fight. Like, no, just use your own resources, fight as hard as you fucking want, and when you're done, when you're ready to stop fighting, then you're done. Just talk. But we just have these like huge nations be with their quote unquote interests. Oh, we actually have great interest in that region for trading purposes. Just fuck all that. Just fuck off. If the UK just fucked off all the time, just take the day off, like whatever you were about to do, just stop it. Don't do that. And the U.S., frankly, I'm sure at this point, it's not in the directly in the paragraph we're reading, but I'm sure the USA was also doing shit. They also should just fuck off. Why are they always going to do this shit? So anyway, the Arab Higher Committee was a political organ of Palestinian Arabs in Mandatory Palestine. Okay, so this was the closest thing to their government that they had. The central political organ comprised the leaders of Palestinian Arab clans and political parties under Motif's chairmanship. The committee was outlawed by the British Mandatory Administration in 1937 after the assassination of a British official. A British-official. A committee of the same name was reconstituted by the Arab League in 1945, but went to abeyance after it proved ineffective during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. It was sidestepped by Egypt and the Arab League with the formation of the All-Palestinian Government in 1948, and both were banned by Jordan. Huh. It's weird how this kind of shit works. Can you imagine just getting together with some people and we're like, we're gonna be the high committee. We're gonna be the leaders of this land. And then some representative from another country is like, no, you're banned. You can't be. You're not them. It's like, fuck you, we are. No, you're banned. The first Arab Higher Committee was formed April 25th, 1936, following the outbreak of the Great Arab Revolt. Popular uprising by Palestinian Arabs in the Mandatory Palestine against the British. They sought independence from British colonial rule. Who else did that? Who else fought the British? I seem to remember some, freedom kind of country that's like, oh yeah, we're free because we fought the British and gained our independence, something like that. I can't remember. If you know, tell me in the comments. What's that country with all the freedom? I think they have hot dogs. And they think it's fucking pretty, like, the most based thing ever that they fought and killed the British and fought for independence. That was like, I think they said that was like the number one sickest, most based thing to do ever, right? I seem to remember hearing that somewhere. Who was that? Anyway, Palestine did it too. How successful was this uprising? I don't want the background. Give me the timeline. Resumed. So this happened over the course of a couple years. Attacking British here and there. The British had already formalized the principle of collective punishment in Palestine in 1924-25. Collective responsibility and punishment ordinances and updated these ordinances in 1936 with collective fines ordinance. These collective fines eventually became a heavy burden for poor Palestinian villagers, especially when the army also confiscated livestock, destroyed properties, imposed long curfews, established police posts, demolished houses, and detained some or all Arab men in distant detention camps. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. Before the Israelis were doing it, the British were doing it to Palestine. I guess they didn't have the French to help them kick the British's ass, you know? Man, if I could go in this debate, I would have been there instead of these two. And it would be me and probably Rabbani versus Finkelstein debating, why do you think the partition agreement was a good idea? Wouldn't a better idea have been for Britain to just fuck off? Fuck all the way off? That'd be a cool debate. Should Britain fuck somewhat off or all the way off? I'm here representing the side that they should fuck all the way off. My opponents think that they should only fuck somewhat off. And while I can agree with the fucking off part of their agreement, the thing that I disagree with is the somewhat. I think they need to fuck all the way off entirely. Because even if they're slightly fucked on, even a little bit, I feel like it's just still totally like an injustice. There will be no justice until they're off, all the way fucked off. So that we can say that with 100% precision that they're not on no more. And that is my closing conclusion. Mr. Kudos, what you don't understand is that in 1946, there was no way for them to live together. And then Lex Green would be like, wait, hold on, what? All right, we're 16 minutes in. Oh yeah, it was the Peel Commission. That's what got us off this track. Peel Commission. All right, whatever. It was just another one of these bullshit things. And they're like, let's partition it. And the Arabs like, no, you can't just carve up our country and make part of it only for Jewish people. It doesn't work like that. They refused. All right, let's continue.
refuse to live together, if you like, or consolidate a unitary state between them. And Peel said there should be two states. That's the principle. The country must be partitioned into two states. This would give a modicum of justice to both sides, if not all their demands, of course. And the United Nations followed suit. The United Nations, UNSCOP, and then the UN General Assembly, representing the will of the international community, said two states is the just solution in this complex situation. The problem was that immediately with the passage of the resolution, the Arab states and the Arabs of Palestine said no, as Norman Finkelstein said. They said no, they rejected the partition idea, the principle of partition, not just the idea of what percentage which side should get, but the principle of partition they said no to. The Jews should not have any part of Palestine for their sovereign territory. Maybe Jews could live as a minority in Palestine. That also was problematic in the eyes of the Palestinian Arab leadership. Husseini had said only Jews who were there before 1917 could actually get citizenship and continue to live there. But the Arabs rejected partition, and the Arabs of Palestine launched, in very disorganized fashion, war against the resolution, against the implementation of the resolution, against the Jewish community in Palestine. And this was their defeat in that civil war between the two communities while the British were withdrawing from Palestine. Led to the Arab invasion, the invasion by the Arab states in May 1948 of the country. Again, basically with the idea of eradicating or preventing the emergence of a Jewish state in line with the United Nations decision and the will of the international community. Norman said that the Zionist enterprise, and he quoted me, meant from the beginning to transfer or expel the Arabs of Palestine, or some of the Arabs of Palestine. And I think he's sort of quoting out of context. The context in which the statements were made that the Jewish state could only emerge if there was a transfer of Arab population was preceded, in the way I wrote it and the way it actually happened, by Arab resistance and hostilities towards the Jewish community. Had the Arabs accepted partition, there would have been a large Arab minority in the Jewish state, which emerged in 47. And in fact, Jewish economists and state builders took into account that there would be a large Arab minority and its needs would be cared for, etc. But this was not to be, because the Arabs attacked. And had they not attacked, perhaps a Jewish state with a large Arab minority could have emerged, but this didn't happen. They went to war, the Jews resisted, and in the course of that war, Arab populations were driven out. Some were expelled, some left because Arab leaders advised them to leave or ordered them to leave. And at the end of the war, Israel said they can't return because they just tried to destroy the Jewish state. And that's the basic reality of what happened in 48. The Jews created a state. The Palestinian Arabs never bothered to even try to create a state before 48 and in the course of the 1948 war. And for that reason, they have no state to this day. The Jews do have a state because they prepared to establish a state, fought for it, and established it hopefully lastingly.
When you say hostility, in case people are not familiar, there was a full-on war where Arab states invaded, and Israel won that war.
Let me just add to clarify. The war had two parts to it. The first part was the Arab community in Palestine, its militiamen, attacked the Jews from November 1947. In other words, from the day after the UN partition resolution was passed, Arab gunmen were busy shooting up Jews, and that snowballed into a full-scale civil war between the two communities in Palestine. In May 1948, a second stage began in the war in which the Arab states invaded the new state, attacked the new state, and they too were defeated, and thus the state of Israel emerged. In the course of this two-stage war, a vast Palestinian refugee problem occurred.
And so after that, the transfer, the expulsion, the thing that people call the Nakba happened. William, could you speak to 1948 and the historical significance of it?
Sure. There's a lot to unpack here. I'll try to limit myself to just a few points. Regarding Zionism and transfer, I think Chaim Weizmann, the head of the World Zionist Organization, had it exactly right when he said that the objective of Zionism is to make Palestine as Jewish as England is English or France is French. In other words, as Norman explained, a Jewish state requires Jewish political, demographic, and territorial supremacy. Without those three elements, the state would be Jewish in name only. And I think what distinguishes Zionism is its insistence, supremacy, and exclusivity. That would be my first point. The second point is, I think what the Soviet foreign minister at the time, Andrei Gromyko, said is exactly right, with one reservation. Gromyko was describing a European savagery unleashed against Europe's Jews. At the time, it wasn't Palestinians or Arabs. The savages and the barbarians were European to the core. It had nothing to do with developments in Palestine or the Middle East. Secondly, at the time that Gromyko was speaking, those Jewish survivors of the Holocaust and others who were in need of safe haven were still overwhelmingly on the European continent and not in Palestine. And I think, given the scale of the savagery, I don't think that any one state or country should have borne the responsibility for addressing this crisis. I think it should have been an international responsibility. The Soviet Union could have contributed. Germany certainly could and should have contributed. The United Kingdom and the United States, which slammed their doors shut to the persecuted Jews of Europe as the Nazis were rising to power, they certainly should have played a role. But instead, what passed for the international community at the time decided to partition Palestine. And here I think we need to judge the partition resolution against the realities that obtained at the time. Two-thirds of the population of Palestine was Arab. The Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, constituted about one-third of the total population and controlled even less of the land within Palestine. As a preeminent Palestinian historian, Walid al-Khalidi has pointed out, the partition resolution, in giving roughly 55% of Palestine to the Jewish community, and I think 42% to the Arab community, to the Palestinians, did not preserve the position of each community or even favor one community at the expense of the others. Rather, it thoroughly inverted and revolutionized the relationship between the two communities. And as many have written, the Nakba was the inevitable consequence of partition, given the nature of Zionism, given the territorial disposition, given the weakness of the Palestinian community, whose leadership had been largely decimated during a major revolt at the end of the 1930s, given that the Arab states were still very much under French and British influence. The Nakba was inevitable, the inevitable product of the partition resolution. And one last point also about the UN's partition resolution is, yes, formally that is what the international community decided on the 29th of November 1947. It's not a resolution that could ever have gotten through the UN General Assembly today for a very simple reason. It was a very different General Assembly. Most African, most Asian states were not yet independent. Were the resolution to be placed before the international community today, and I find it telling that the minority opinion was led by India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, I think they would have represented the clear majority. So partition, given what we know about Zionism, given that it was entirely predictable what would happen, given the realities on the ground in Palestine, was deeply unjust. And the idea that either the Palestinians or the Arab states could have accepted such a resolution is I think, an illusion. That was in 1947. We saw what happened in 48 and 49. Palestinian society was essentially destroyed. Over 80%, I believe, of Palestinians resident in the territory that became the State of Israel were either expelled or fled, and ultimately were ethnically cleansed, because ethnic cleansing consists of two components. It's not just forcing people into refuge or expelling them. It's just as importantly preventing their return. And here, and Benny Morris has written, I think, an article about Yosef Weitz and the transfer committees. There was a very detailed initiative to prevent the return, and it consisted of razing hundreds of Palestinian villages to the ground, which was systematically implemented, and so on. And so Palestinians became a stateless people. Now, what is the most important reason that no Arab state was established in Palestine? Well, since the 1930s, the Zionist leadership and the Hashemite leadership of Jordan, as has been thoroughly researched and written about by the Israeli-British historian Avi Shlaim, essentially colluded to prevent the establishment of an independent Arab state in Palestine in the late 1940s. There's much more here, but I think those are the key points I would make about 1948.
We may talk about Zionism, Britain.
Right after Rabbani, we get this. Okay, I'm talking about Lex. Lex is lying. Lex is in gray here. This is Lex. And here, he's trying to help Benny make his point, trying to emphasize how violent the Arabs were. And then Benny goes on for, almost another minute, and then he passes it over to Rabbani. Rabbani talks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes. He tells him, next time, just say 1 point, please. Limit your comments to 1 point. We may talk about Zionism and the UK, or he says Britain, and all the things you mentioned. Such a weird phrase, because he talked about Zionism, but that's what they were all talking about. He didn't really mention Britain at all. I think he said the UK or the US could have helped, right? he listed them among other things. I don't know why he picked out Britain among that. And he kind of smirks about it. Look at this. He's saying it as if it's all like way off the topic of what he was asking for.
I would make about 1948.
We may talk about Zionism, Britain, UN assemblies, and all the things you mentioned. There's a lot to dig into. So, again, if we can keep it to just one statement moving forward,
Sure.
After Stephen, if you want to go longer. Also, we should acknowledge.
I mean, come on. It's so obvious that he's just like, he loves Stephen and Benny Morris, and he wants to help their side.
Those are the key points I would make about 1948.
We may talk about Zionism, Britain, UN assemblies, and all the things you mentioned. There's a lot.
UN assemblies. That was the first thing they talked about. All of the three of these guys talked about UN assemblies. Britain was brought up very briefly, and, honestly, probably should have been brought up more to get the true background of what was going on, but whatever. He didn't. And Zionism, that's the whole point of the whole thing. The whole point of the whole thing is about Zionism. We may talk about Zionism. Man, he just really sucks. It's nonsensical. Absolutely nonsensical. And then he's like, okay, we'll bring it to Stephen and let him jibber jabber. He talks real fast.
To dig into. So, again, if we can keep it to just one statement moving forward,
Sure.
After Stephen, if you want to go a little longer. Also, we should acknowledge the fact that the speaking speeds of people here are different. Stephen speaks about 10 times faster than me. Stephen, do you want to comment on 1948?
Yeah, I think it's interesting where people choose to start the history. I notice a lot of people like to start at either 47 or 48 because it's the first time where they can clearly point to a catastrophe that occurs on the Arab side that they want to ascribe 100% of the blame to the newly emergent Israeli state to. But I feel like when you have this type of reading of history, it feels like the goal is to moralize everything first and then to pick and choose facts that kind of support the statements of your initial moral statement afterwards. Whenever people are talking about 48 or the establishment of the Arab state, I never hear about the fact that a civil war started in 47. That was largely instigated because of the Arab rejectionism of the 47 partition plan. I never hear about the fact that the majority of the land that was acquired happened by purchases from Jewish organizations of Palestinian Arabs of the Ottoman Empire before the mandatory period in 1920 even started. Funnily enough, King Abdullah of Jordan was quoted as saying the Arabs are as prodigal in selling their land as they are in weeping about it. I never hear about the multiple times that Arabs rejected partition, rejected living with Jews, rejected any sort of state that would have even had any sort of Jewish exclusivity. It's funny because it was brought up before that the partition plan was unfair, and that's why the Arabs rejected it, as though they rejected it because it was unfair, because of the amount of land that Jews were given, and not just due to the fact that Jews were given land at all, as though a 30% partition or a 25% partition would have been accepted, when I don't think that was the reality of the circumstances. I feel like most of the other stuff has been said, but I noticed that whenever people talk about 48 or the years preceding 48, I think the worst thing that happens is there's a cherry picking of the facts where basically all of the blame is ascribed to this built-in idea of Zionism, that because of a handful of quotes or because of an ideology, we can say that transfer or population expulsion or basically the mandate of all of these Arabs being kicked off the land was always going to happen, when I think there's a refusal sometimes as well to acknowledge that regardless of the ideas of some of the Zionist leaders, there is a political, social, and military reality on the ground that they're forced to contend with. And unfortunately, the Arabs, because of their inability to engage in diplomacy and only to use tools of war to try to negotiate everything going on in mandatory Palestine, basically always gave the Jews a reason or an excuse to fight and acquire land through that way because of their refusal to negotiate on anything else, whether it was the partition plan in 47, whether it was the Lausanne peace conference afterwards, where Israel even offered to annex Gaza in 51, where they offered to take in 100,000 refugees. Every single deal is just rejected out of hand because the Arabs don't want a Jewish state anywhere in this region of the world.
I would like to engage Professor Morris. If you don't mind, I'm not with the first name. It's just not my way of relating.
You can just call me Morris. You don't need the professor.
Okay. There's a real problem here. And it's been a problem I've had over many years of reading your work. Apart perhaps from as grandchild, I suspect nobody knows your work better than I do. I've read it many times, not once, not twice, at least 3 times, everything you've written. And the problem is, it's a kind of quicksilver. It's very hard to grasp a point and hold you to it. So we're going to try here to see whether we can hold you to a point. And then you argue with me the point. I have no problem with that. Your name, please?
Stephen Bonnell.
Okay. Mr. Bonnell referred to cherry picking and handful of quotes. Now, it's true that when you wrote your first book on the Palestinian refugee question, you only had a few lines on this issue of transfer.
4 pages.
Yeah. In the first book.
In the first book, 4 pages.
Maybe 4. I'm not going to quarrel. My memory is not clear. We're talking about 40 years ago. I read it, but then I read other things by you. Okay. And you were taken to task, if my memory is correct, that you hadn't adequately documented the claims of transfer. Allow me to finish. And I thought that was a reasonable challenge because it was an unusual claim for a mainstream Israeli historian to say, as you did in that first book, that from the very beginning, transfer figured prominently in Zionist thinking. That was an unusual. If you read Anita Shapira, you read Shabtai Tevitt, that was an unusual acknowledgement by you. And then I found it very impressive that in that revised version of your first book, you devoted 25 pages to copiously documenting the salience of transfer in Zionist thinking. And in fact, you used a very provocative and resonant phrase. You said that transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. We're not talking about circumstantial factors, a war, Arab hostility. You said it's inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. Now, as I said, so we won't be accused of cherry picking, those were 25 very densely argued pages. And then in an interview, and I could cite several quotes, but I'll choose one, you said, removing a population was needed. Let's look at the words. Without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established. Now, you're the one, again, I was very surprised when I read your book. Here I'm referring to Righteous Victims. I was very surprised when I came to that page 37, where you wrote that territorial displacement and dispossession was the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. Territorial displacement and dispossession were the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. So you then went on to say, because the Arab population rationally feared territorial displacement and dispossession, it of course opposed Zionism. That's as normal as Native Americans opposing the Euro-American manifest destiny in the history of our own country, because they understood it would be at their expense. It was inbuilt and inevitable. And so now, for you to come along and say that it all happened just because of the war, that otherwise the Zionists made all these plans for a happy minority to live there, that simply does not gel. It does not cohere. It is not reconcilable with what you yourself have written. It was inevitable and inbuilt. Now, in other situations you've said, that's true, but I think it was a greater good to establish a Jewish state at the expense of the indigenous population. That's another kind of argument. That was Theodore Roosevelt's argument in our own country. He said, we don't want the whole of North America to remain a squalid refuge for these wigwams and teepees. We have to get rid of them and make this a great country. But he didn't deny that it was inbuilt and inevitable.
I think you've made your point. First, I'll take up something that Muin said. He said that the Nakba was inevitable.
As have you.
And predictable. No, I've never said that. It was inevitable and predictable only because the Arabs assaulted the Jewish community and state in 1947-48. Had there been no assault, there probably wouldn't have been a refugee problem. There's no reason for a refugee problem to have occurred, expulsions to have occurred, dispossession, massive dispossession to occur. These occurred as a result of war. Now, Norman said that I said that transfer was inbuilt into Zionism in one way or another. And this is certainly true. In order to buy land, they had the Jews bought tracts of land on which some Arabs sometimes lived. Sometimes they bought tracts of land on which there weren't Arab villages, but sometimes they bought land on which there were Arabs. And according to Ottoman law and the British, at least in the initial years of the British mandate, the law said that the people who bought the land could do what they liked with the people who didn't own the land, who were basically squatting on the land, which is the Arab tenant farmers, which is, we're talking about a very small number actually of Arabs who were displaced as a result of land purchases in the Ottoman period or the Mandate period. But there was dispossession in one way. They didn't possess the land, they didn't own it, but they were removed from the land. And this did happen in Zionism. And there's, if you like, an inevitability in Zionist ideology of buying tracts of land and starting to work it yourself and settle it with your own people and so on. That made sense. But what we're really talking about is what happened in 47-48. And in 47-48, the Arabs started a war. And actually, people pay for their mistakes. And the Palestinians have never actually agreed to pay for their mistakes. They make mistakes, they attack, they suffer as a result. And we see something similar going on today in the Gaza Strip. They do something terrible. They kill 1,200 Jews. They abduct 250 women and children and babies and old people and whatever. And then they start screaming, please save us from what we did, because the Jews are counterattacking. And this is what happened then. And this is what's happening now. There's something fairly similar in the situation here. expulsion, and this is important, Norman, you should pay attention to this. You didn't raise that. Expulsion, transfer were never policy of the Zionist movement before 47. It doesn't exist in Zionist platforms of the various political parties, of the Zionist organization, of the Israeli state, of the Jewish agency. Nobody would have actually made it into policy because there was always a large minority. If there were people who wanted it, always a large minority of Jewish politicians and leaders would have said, no, this is immoral. We cannot start a state on the basis of an expulsion. So it was never adopted, and actually was never adopted as policy even in 48, even though Ben-Gurion wanted as few Arabs in the course of the war staying in the Jewish state after they attacked it. He didn't want disloyal citizens staying there because they wouldn't have been loyal citizens. But this made sense in the war itself. But the movement itself and its political parties never accepted it. It's true that in 1937, when the British, as part of the proposal by the Peel Commission to divide the country into two states, one Arab, one Jewish, which the Arabs, of course, rejected, Peel also recommended that the Arabs, most of the Arabs in the Jewish state should be transferred, because otherwise, if they stayed and were disloyal to the emergent Jewish state, this would cause endless disturbances, warfare, killing, and so on. So Ben-Gurion and Weizmann latched onto this proposal by the most famous democracy in the world, the British democracy, when they proposed the idea of transfer side by side with the idea of partition, because it made sense. And they said, well, if the British say so, we should also advocate it, but they never actually tried to pass it as Zionist policy, and they fairly quickly stopped even talking about transfer after 1938.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is that 47 was an offensive war, not a defensive war.
By the Arabs, yes.
By the Arabs.
Yeah.
And you're also saying that there was never a top-down policy of expulsion.
Yes.
Just to clarify the point.
If I understood you correctly,
Again, Lex's summary was not great. Not great. He tries to blame a lot of this on the British. He's like, oh, well, the British had this one idea, and they thought it was the most famous democracy in the world, so they said, yeah, we'll do it too. The most famous democracy in the world, the British democracy. When British, as a part of the proposal by the Peel Commission to divide the country into two states, one Arab, one Jewish, which the Arabs, of course, rejected, Peel also recommended most of the Arabs and the Jewish should be transferred because otherwise, if they stay, they would be disloyal. Okay. So Ben-Gurion and Weizmann latched onto this proposal. They proposed the idea of transfer because it made sense. So they advocated for it, but they never actually tried to pass it as Zionist policy. And then quickly stopped talking about transfer after 38. So between... I mean, he's really backpedaling a lot because he seems like he's pointing out a lot of the evidence and trying to make an excuse for it, or just trying to blame it on the Arabs or the British. They sometimes bought land, but a very small amount. He had this whole thing about how people who didn't own the land, they were basically squatting on the land, which is the Arab tenant farmers. They're basically you're squatting. So it's like you're just you're a peasant, whatever. You live in a little village, you got a little farm that your parents owned, that your grandparents worked on, whatever. And then the British are like, no, actually, that's private property. You're squatting right now. You can fuck off. It's not legally your land. Such bullshit. They're basically squatting. We're talking about a very small number, actually, of Arabs who were displaced as a result of land purchases. But there was dispossession in one way. They didn't possess the land, they didn't own it. So they're on the land, living their lives, but they didn't technically possess it. So when I drove them away, that's technically not dispossession. Like, that's that's some bullshit. Ain't that some bullshit? Anyway, he talks about war once in a while, but then he's going on about this, how, like, no, the Peel Commission also recommended transfer, and Ben Gurion and Weizmann latched onto it and advocated for it. But it was never part of official policy, and they stopped talking about it in 1938, and then very quickly did make it into official policy in 1947. So it's not like this idea just went away. And then Lex comes in like, just to be clear, this was an offensive war, not a defensive war. How does that clarify anything? By the Arabs. Like, Benny has to say by the Arabs. As in, what does that mean? That the whole war is offensive? Like, if it's people fighting the people who already live there for their land, or people fighting for people who recently stole their land, it doesn't make sense to just clarify it as offensive and defensive. And even if this is to clarify, why wouldn't you just say who is the offender and who is the defender? Maybe say what are they defending? And then he also clarifies that there was never a top-down policy of expulsion. Again, you weren't listening, dude. Before 47. And that 10 years earlier, they were explicitly advocating for it. Before they could even have policies, because they didn't have a state yet. They were talking about it. There was never a top-down policy. Yes, there was. There was in the year before the. He's just making this stupid point of like, there never was a top-down policy before 1947. I never ever robbed a bank before yesterday. Never. So this report concludes that I never robbed a bank before yesterday, right? So we can be clear that I am definitely not a bank robber who would do that kind of thing before yesterday. Only because I ran out of money. I ended up getting a little bit of a refund from the bank yesterday, but as you can see, according to the record, I never ever robbed a bank before yesterday. All right. Well, we got to keep going. We're close to the end. We're 43 minutes.
You're making the claim that transfer, expulsion, and so on was in fact a very localized phenomenon, resulting from individual land purchases, and that, if I understand you correctly, you're also making the claim that the idea that a Jewish state requires a removal or overwhelming reduction of the non-Jewish population was.
If the Arabs are attacking you, yes.
But that, let's say prior to 1947, it would be your claim that the idea that a significant reduction or wholesale removal of the Arab population was not part of Zionist thinking. Well, I think there's two problems with that. I think what you're saying about localized disputes is correct, but I also think that there is a whole literature that demonstrates that transfer was envisioned by Zionist leaders on a much broader scale than simply individual land purchases. In other words, it went way beyond, we need to remove these tenants so that we can farm this land. The idea was, we can't have a state where all these Arabs remain, and we have to get rid of them. And the second, I think, impediment to that view is that long before the UN General Assembly convened to address the question of Palestine, Palestinian and Arab and other leaders as well had been warning ad infinitum that the purpose of the Zionist movement is not just to establish a Jewish state, but to establish an exclusivist Jewish state, and that transfer, forced displacement, was fundamental to that project. And just responding to, sorry, was it Bunnell or Donnell?
Yeah.
With a B?
Yeah.
Yeah. You made the point that the problem here is that people don't recognize is that the first and last result for the Arabs is always war. I think there's a problem with that. I think you might do well to recall the 1936 general strike conducted by Palestinians at the beginning of the revolt, which at the time was the longest recorded general strike in history. You may want to consult the book published last year by Loring Allen, A History of False Hope, which discusses in great detail the consistent engagement by Palestinians, their leaders, their elites, their diplomats, and so on, with all these international committees. If we look at today, the Palestinians are once again going to the International Court of Justice. They're consistently trying to persuade the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to do his job. They have launched widespread boycott campaigns. So, of course, the Palestinians have engaged in military resistance. But I think the suggestion that this has always been their first and last resort and that they have somehow spurned civic action, spurned diplomacy, I think really has no basis in reality.
I'll respond to that, and then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I am curious. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this arena versus the three of you guys, for sure. A claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, or the idea that as soon as the Jews envisioned a state in Palestine, they knew that it would involve some mass transfer of population, perhaps a mass expulsion. I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D at some point. The issue that I run into is, while you can find quotes from leaders, while you can find maybe desires expressed in diaries, I feel like it's hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace, because I feel like every time there was a huge deal on the table that would have had a sizable Jewish and Arab population living together, the Arabs would reject it out of hand. So, for instance, when we say that transfer was inevitable, when we say that Zionists would have never accepted, a sizable Arab population, how do you explain the acceptance of the 47 partition plan that would have had a huge Arab population living in the Jewish state? Is your contention that after the acceptance of that, after the establishment of that state, that Jews would have slowly started to expel all of these Arab citizens from their country? Or how do you explain that in Lausanne a couple years later that Israel was willing to formally annex the Gaza Strip and make 200,000 or so people those citizens? But I'm just curious, how do we get this idea of Zionism always means mass transfer, when there were times, at least early on in the history of Israel and a little bit before it, where Israel would have accepted a state that would have had a massive Arab population in it? Is your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards? Or
is that question to me or Norm?
Either one. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. Yeah.
There's some misunderstandings here, so let's try to clarify that.
He's just curious for an incorporation of the answer. Is it your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards, or is it your contention that after the acceptance of that, after the establishment of that state, that Jews would have slowly started to expel all these Arab citizens from the country? That's when he said, of course it was. I think... Let's go back here then again.
Some
misunderstandings. Or Norm?
Either one. I'm just curious for the population in it. But I'm just curious how to make 200,000 or so people, those citizens, formally annex their country? Or how do you explain that in Lausanne a couple years later that Israel was willing to formally annex the Gaza Strip and make 200,000 or so people those citizens? But I'm just curious, how do we get this idea of Zionism always means mass transfer, when there were times, at least early on in the history of Israel and a little bit before it, where Israel would have accepted a state that would have had a massive Arab population in it? Is your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards? Or
is that question to me or Norm?
Either one. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. Yeah.
There's some misunderstandings here, so let's try to clarify that. Number one, it was the old historians who would point to the fact, in Professor Morris's terminology, the old historians, what he called not real historians, he called them chroniclers, not real historians. It was the old Israeli historians who denied the centrality of transfer in Zionist thinking. It was then Professor Morris who, contrary to Israel's historian establishment, who said, now you remind me it's 4 pages, but it came at the end of the book. It was
No, it's at the beginning of the book.
transfer.
Yeah, transfer is dealt with in 4 pages at the beginning of my first book on the Palestinian refugee problem.
It's a fault of my memory, but the point still stands. It was Professor Morris who introduced this idea in what you might call a big way.
Yeah, but I didn't say it
okay.
was central to the
Okay,
Zionist
allow me-
experiment
okay,
or
allow-
experience.
allow me-
You're saying centrality.
Okay.
I never said it was central. I said it
Okay.
was there,
Okay.
the idea.
It's, by the way, it's okay to respond back and forth. This is great. And also, just a quick question, if I may.
Mhm.
You're using quotes from Benny, from Professor Morris. It's also okay to say those quotes do not reflect the
That would
full
be
context
fine.
of the.
That-
So, like, if we go back, if to quotes we've said in the past, and you've both here have written, the three of you have written on this topic a lot, is we
Quick, just to be clear, that the
both here have written.
This is such a frustrating part of the debate. This is when, this is this part. Let's get like a, I just need like a, maybe like a yellow color, so I can use to indicate things. So we're right around this part. This is where it gets frustrating. Now, I'm curious, in an alternate universe, when Steven asked that question, then Rabani's like, is that for me or Norm? And he's like, either one. And then Norm jumped in. But what if Rabani had jumped in instead? What if Rabani had answered that? Now, I think he does go back and answer Steven later, but this is frustrating right here. Because this is where... Oh, hold on. This is where Steven helps Lex to just derail the conversation. To just stop Norm from saying his point. To get... Because they're picking up off of each other of like, oh... They're misquoting, quoting out of context. Lex Friedman is such a fucking moron that he thinks. By the way, he's not quoting, or he's quoting from his book, but he's also explaining in great detail what these what the context is of them and the meaningness of it, right? I don't know. It just the way Lex is treating it. It sounds like he thinks like it's clip trimming. It's the professor version of finding some clip of something someone said in the past, and then attacking them with it today. But this is incredibly legitimate, and the fact that he's trying to bail Benny out of this problem is fucking concerning. We have a debate where the moderator is clearly swinging for one side.
The three of you have written on this topic a lot, is we should be careful and just admit, like, well, yeah, well, that's
just real quick, just to be clear, the contention is that Norm is quoting a part and saying that this was the.
And he just jumps in. Norm is quoting a part and saying that this was the entire reason for this, whereas Benny's saying it's a part of that. No, Norm is not quoting a part and saying that this was the entire reason for this. What does that even mean? He was talking about how Benny wrote 25 fucking pages exhaustively detailing the importance of transfer and the ideology of Zionism. Who concluded that it was inevitable and inbuilt. And he used those words. Nobody needed your stupid ass to butt in and try to, ask this stupid fucking question, Destiny. He's such a piece of shit, dumb fuck. I really hate him. Okay, and then they finally give it back to Norm, and they let him talk for another 2 minutes or so. So that's good. Let's keep going.
The entire reason for this,
Okay.
whereas Benny's saying it's a part of that.
I'm not quoting a part. I'm quoting 25 pages where Professor Morris was at great pains to document the claim that appeared in those early 4 pages of his book. Now, you say it never became part of the official Zionist platform.
It never became part
Okay,
of policy.
Fine.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but
Yeah,
it
okay.
wasn't policy.
We're also asked, well, this is true. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? It's because it's a very simple fact, which everybody understands. Ideology doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are real world practical problems. You can't just take an ideology and superimpose it on a political reality and turn it into a fact. It was the British mandate. There was significant Arab resistance to Zionism. And that resistance was based on the fact, as you said, the fear of territorial displacement and dispossession. So you couldn't very well expect the Zionist movement to come out in neon lights and announce, hey, we're going to be expelling you the first chance we get.
Okay,
That's not realistic.
Okay,
Now,
let me
okay.
respond. Look, you've said it a number of times that the Arabs, from fairly early on in the conflict, from the 1890s or the early 1900s, said the Jews intend to expel us. This doesn't mean that it's true. It means that some Arabs said this, maybe believing it was true, maybe using it as a political instrument to gain support to mobilize Arabs against the Zionist experiment. But the fact is, transfer did not occur before 1947. And Arabs later said, and since then, have said that the Jews want to build a third temple on the Temple Mount, as if that's what really the mainstream of Zionism has always wanted and always strived for. But this is nonsense. It's something that Husseini used to use as a way to mobilize masses for the cause, using religion as the way to get them to join him. The fact that Arabs said that the Zionists wanted to dispossess us doesn't mean it's true. It just means that there's some Arabs thought that, maybe said it sincerely and maybe insincerely.
Professor Morris.
Later it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is true.
Professor
Because the
Morris.
Arabs attacked the Jews.
Professor Morris, I read through your stuff. Even yesterday, I was looking through Righteous Victims.
You should read other things. You're wasting your time.
No, actually, no. I do read other things, but I don't consider it a waste of time to read you. Not at all. You say that this wasn't inherent in Zionism. Now, would you agree that David Ben-Gurion was a Zionist?
A major Zionist leader.
Right. Would you agree Chaim Weizmann was a Zionist?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe they were. I believe they took their ideology seriously. It was the first generation. Just like with the Bolsheviks, the first generation was committed to an idea. By the 1930s, it was just pure realpolitik. The ideology went out the window. The first generation, I have no doubt about their convictions. Okay? They were Zionists. Transfer was inevitable and inbuilt in Zionism.
You keep repeating the same thing.
Because I have, as I said, I have a problem.
So that when he mentions that Weizmann and Ben-Gurion were major Zionist leaders who took their ideology seriously, they both advocated for transfer as part of Zionism. And he agrees to all that. And he agrees that it's inbuilt in. That was all way before 1947. Benny's saying, well, transfer didn't actually happen until 1947. So he's trying to say, like, the idea and the fact all occurred at the same time. When actually it's this thing that's been in the cards, in the plan for at least a decade or more.
Reconciling what you're saying. It either was incidental or it was deeply entrenched. Here I read two very resonant words, inevitable and inbuilt.
Deeply entrenched, I never wrote
Well,
that.
And that's how that's how Benny tries to sidestep, because he's taking him to task. He's nailing him down. He's saying, Benny, you wrote this and this and this and this. Yeah, you're saying it wasn't inevitable. And then he wants to sidestep it by saying, I never said that word. I never said deeply entrenched. I never wrote deeply entrenched. That's what you invented. You invented that term. Dude, he's fucking paraphrasing you. Answer the fucking question, you dipshit.
I'm not sure.
It's something you
I
just
don't-
invented.
okay.
But
In,
it was
inevitable
there.
and inbuilt.
The idea.
Okay,
Let me concede.
fine,
Let me concede
fine.
something.
No.
The idea of transfer was there. Israel Zangwill,
The idea was just there. It was there.
British Zionists talked about it early on in the century. Even Herzl, in some way, talked about transferring population.
According to your 25 pages, everybody talked
Well,
about
that's
it.
we keep bringing up this line from the 25 pages and the 4 pages. You know, we're lucky to have.
And here we are. The question of the century. Instead of listening to this,
Hold on a second, we keep 4 pages. Keep bringing up this line. Hold on a second, we keep bringing up this line. The 25 pages and the 4 pages. We're lucky to have faith in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism, and whatever Zionism is today, and how much power influence the Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and the influence the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today. Have on Israel today. Have on Israel today. Have on Israel today. Have on.
all right. Great question.
Up to 1948, Zionist ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise up to 1948. And I think Zionist ideology was also important in the first decades of Israel's existence. Slowly, the hold of Zionism, like if you like Bolshevism held the Soviet Union, gradually faded. And a lot of Israelis today think in terms of individual success and then the capitalism and all sorts of things which have nothing to do with Zionism. But Zionism was very important. But what I'm saying is that the idea of transfer wasn't the core of Zionism. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jews who had been vastly persecuted in Eastern Europe and incidentally in the Arab world, the Muslim world, for centuries, and eventually ending up with the Holocaust. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jewish people by establishing a state or re-establishing a Jewish state on the ancient Jewish homeland, which is something the Arabs today even deny, that there were Jews in Palestine or the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. Arafat famously said, what temple was there on Temple Mount? Maybe it was in Nablus, which of course is nonsense. But they had a strong connection for thousands of years to the land to which they wanted to return and returned there. They found that on the land lived hundreds of thousands of Arabs. And the question was how to accommodate the vision of a Jewish state in Palestine alongside the existence of these Arab masses living on, who were indigenous, in fact, to the land by that stage. And the idea of partition, because they couldn't live together, because the Arabs didn't want to live together with the Jews. And I think the Jews also didn't want to live together in one state with Arabs in general. The idea of partition was the thing which the Zionists accepted. Okay, we can only get a small part of Palestine. The Arabs will get in 37 most of Palestine. In 1947, the ratios were changed, but we can live side by side with each other in a partitioned Palestine. And this was the essence of it. The idea of transfer was there, but it was never adopted as policy. But
And it's just there's so many examples of this, but when he is kind of conceding these facts about certain things, he mentions that this partition from 37 was like, he goes, the idea of partition was the thing which Zionists accepted. Okay, we can only get a small part of Palestine. But most of Palestine in 1947, the ratios were changed. But we can live side by side with each other. Just like, think about that. Every single time they make a new little plan, a partition plan, they want more and more and more and more and more and more of the country. Every time it's like, oh, No, we just want a little bit. Oh, we want a little more than half. We just want a little 75%. And he just kind of slides it in there, like as if it's supposed to help his case.
The essence of it. The idea of transfer was there, but it was never adopted as policy. But in 1947-48, the Arabs attacked, trying to destroy essentially the Zionist enterprise and the emergent Jewish state. And the reaction was transfer in some way, not as policy, but this is what happened on the battlefield. And this is also what Ben Gurion at some point began to want as well.
Right. Well, one of the first books on this issue I read when I was still in high school, because my late father had it, was the Diaries of Theodor Herzl. And I think, Theodor Herzl, of course, was the founder of the contemporary Zionist movement. And I think if you read that, it's very clear. For Herzl, the model upon which the Zionist movement would proceed, his model was Cecil Rhodes. I think, Rhodes, from what I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, has quite a prominent place in Herzl's diaries. I think Herzl was also corresponding with him and seeking his support. Cecil Rhodes, of course, was the British colonialist after whom the former white minority regime in Rhodesia was named. And Herzl also says explicitly in his diaries that it is essential to remove the existing population from Palestine.
Can I respond to this?
In a population.
So at that point, after he says that, that's when Benny wants to jump in. Herzl said explicitly in his diaries, "Can I respond to that?" In a moment, please. He really wants to jump on this thing about Herzl's diaries. Now, Rabbani is making a tie between Herzl and Cecil Rhodes. In a previous stream, we looked up about Cecil Rhodes. He founded the De Beers Diamond Corporation. He was a slaver, and then he went to Zimbabwe, expelled tons of indigenous people, called it Rhodesia, and was a whole genocidal freak. Just the worst kind of guy you could ever imagine. And he's saying Herzl, who's the father of Zionism, was down with this guy. They were homies. They're homies. And he's like, let me respond to that. He's like, in a moment. He said, we shall have the spirit of the penniless. Let's keep going.
Across the borders and procure employment for them elsewhere or something. And Israel Zangwill, who you mentioned, a land without a people for a people without a land. They knew damn well it wasn't a land without a people. I'll continue, but please go ahead.
All right. Here's his clapback about Herzl's diary. There's one small diary entry in Herzl's vast 5 volumes. There's one paragraph which actually mentions the idea of transfer. Okay, so he's right. Moeen said, he said it explicitly in his diaries that it's essential to remove the existing population of Palestine. One small entry. One paragraph. Okay. But he also said that Herzl's model was based upon Cecil Rhodes. Does he have anything to say about that? There are people who think that Herzl was actually pointing to South America when he was talking about that. The Jews are going to move to Argentina and they would try to buy out or buy off for spirit the penniless natives to make way for Jewish settlement. Maybe he wasn't even talking about the Arabs in that particular passage. That's the argument of some people. Maybe he was. But the point is, it has only 0.01% of the diary, which is devoted to the subject. It's not a central idea. In Herzl's thinking, what Herzl wanted, and this is what's important, not Rhodes. I don't think he was the model. Herzl wanted to create a liberal democratic Western state in Palestine for Jews. That was the idea, not some imperial enterprise serving some imperial master, which is what Rhodes was about. but to have a Jewish state which was modeled on the Western democracies in Palestine. Well, we're way past our hour, right? We're going to get into this more in hour 2, which I think we'll begin next time. I think this is definitely our final for hour 1. We're going to pick it up from hour 2. And we're going to learn more about Theodore Herzl, Cecil Rhodes, and all kinds of other stuff. Did Herzl use Rhodes as a model? Or didn't he? Is one paragraph in your diary sufficient? I don't know. Would we expect more than one paragraph if it was a central idea? Possibly. Who knows? We're going to get into that more. I'm tired. You're tired. We're all tired. Let's fuck off and come back next time. So thank you, everybody. Remember, it's a long debate, and you're going to have to wait because it takes me a long, long time to get through it all. All right? But that's just how it is. That's just how it is.
Now this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow. We watch the video, but then we stop and take it back. Make sure we understand every single point made. It doesn't matter if you have to wait 1 hour of debate. Cover takes kudos 12 to do, but that's because he has to know it all.